Hi guys, it's Laura, and I want to do a quick inspiration for you guys about model drawing. One of my favorite things in the whole universe to do is to always have you like releasing releasing old beliefs, old ideas about art and drawing and how those things happen so that you can get more freedom, more playfulness, more sincerity, and I was going to say freedom again. freedom, and expression in your drawing. So, I have a course called Model Magic that I'm opening in August, and it's kind of the inspiration for today's video. So, the Model Magic is a model drawing class. Model drawing is an amazing art form where we look at the human body, and not just the human body, but like the expressions of the human body, the energy, the language of different poses and things, right? They say so much. Humans are fascinating to people like me or anyone who's watching this video. If you're not interested, then I'm sure you already moved on. And so what I want to talk to you about today is that I was never an artist growing up. I mean, I always sang and I loved pretty things and I was interested in art, but I couldn't draw anything, and I couldn't draw anything realistic. And that always frustrated me a little bit, but what can you do? But after high school, I took a year of liberal arts, and then I got very interested in Parsons School design, and I wanted to go study fashion design. And I started studying art. And when I took my first class at Parsons, it was a summer class because they required me to take a summer class to get in to the program. So this was like a 5-week intensive, all day, every day. Let me show you what I'm using. Newsprint paper. And I had the most incredible teacher, Mr. Joe Hask, who's still on the faculty at Parsons. And it was not a fashion drawing class. It was a life drawing class. So we had nude models every day. And it was like 6 hours a day of model drawing. Incredible. Okay, so to get to the point quickly, which is always hard for me because I want to share so much with you, especially if I don't know you yet. We used newsprint paper, but it was 18 inches by 24 inches, so it was really big. Now, this is really important because when you're working large, you draw with your arm. And that was one of when I was talking about myths, like getting rid of old ideas about art, drawing with your arm is something we never even considered as kids, right? Because in school, it's A, B, C. 1, 2, 3. We draw with our fingers. But we create symbols with our fingers. But in the drawing classes we're drawing with our arm. Imagine that. All those people who say they can't draw a straight line. It's easy to draw a straight line with your arm. It's difficult to draw a straight line with your fingers because you run out of space. Well, I've been practicing for a long time. I'm a professional, but okay, so what I'm using today is something I had never used before I took my first life drawing class called Vine. It says just artist charcoal, but this is really something called Vine charcoal. It's less expensive. It's not less black. I always like to get things that are soft. Soft meaning they get very dark and very light. Hard graphite, hard pencils, and hard charcoal are harder, and the color stays lighter. I just want to show you what this charcoal behaves like. It's very smudgy. And what I learned on those first days in that first drawing class was that it was okay to get messy, and I learned to mess up my paper. And so now I'm going to get to took me 5 minutes, right? To get to the point. Okay, this is called a chamois. They used to be made out of animal skin. Now it's just like ultra suede fabric or something. And what he would have us do is he would have the model. You see how it kind of erases the drawing, but not completely. Cool either way. Like, it's okay to have. For me, what I learned in that experience was that the dirtier my paper gets, quote unquote, dirty, messier, the more and more relaxed I become. Instead of having that fear of like stark white paper and a perfect black line, right? You start to get like, it's less startling. Okay, so it's less startling as your paper gets dirtier. So what he would have us do is every time a model posed, and these models were not usually standing. I'll definitely have you know that in my Model Magic course, all the models are standing and all the poses are standing at different angles and poses, but always standing. Because I come from a fashion illustration background, I find it really relevant for fashion, people who want to study fashion. We don't distort the bodies. They don't have to be fashion bodies, but they are standing. I'll probably create another model drawing course where they're not. Whatever the model was posing like, we only had a second to capture it. So the model would pose, we'd have like 5 seconds, and then the model would take another pose. And you'd be like, okay. So you really only had time to capture what you saw in a second. So it was like, we called these gestures, and they were really only the essence of what you saw. So imagine you're looking at an entire human being. I mean, this also works if you're looking at a deer or a horse or anything. But imagine that you had to sum it up in a single sweeping energy. And then your time's up. That's what we did. We did that for hours the first day. And it's terrifying at first, but over time you start to really be able to zoom in and focus on what that essence is. And the beautiful thing about it is you use your arm to draw it. And the other thing that's so beautiful about it is that because it's drawn quickly in time and with great feeling, because you're literally trying to take all the beauty of what you see and insert it into a single sweeping gesture, it actually brings a lot of energy into the drawing. But the other thing is, I mean, I guess I could be sitting here at like a whiteboard or something, but to me that would be a completely different experience because this is tactile. This paper is gritty. The charcoal actually doesn't smell like anything, but a lot of times the art supplies smell and they have their own texture too. They make sound, you know. So let's say I don't have a model in front of me, but let's just say, you know, once you've learned to work that way, it becomes quicker to do. Okay, I'm drawing from my head though, and not from what I see, so it's a little bit different. But I don't know if you can see this model emerging. Yeah. How softly. Maybe she has another hand right here. And how quickly. Now this I love. Oh no, I just fell in love with this. So I'm going to keep it. I could spray it. That's the only way that it will not disappear. But all I wanted to drive home for you today is the idea of drawing, wiping, drawing, wiping, drawing, wiping. This allows you to release your drawing. This allows you to open up, not get attached to perfecting something, which is usually the biggest problem students have. And my greatest joy is to work with students to release the perfectionism. It's just like a metaphor for everything in life, because as you get past the frozen fear of perfectionism, you start to fall in love with yourself. You start to fall in love with textures and imperfections and surprises and emotions and accidents and building and adventuring into the unknown. These are all things we don't really have access to when we're being perfect. And I'm getting all goosebumpy as I even say this. So I'm going to keep this video short. But if you want to learn more about model magic, it's a model drawing course. It's for beginners, but it's also for advanced, because the exercises I teach in there I use for my entire life. They never get old. They never get old. And it's like model drawing always meets you where you're at. I like to call it yoga on paper. You always come to it where you're at, and you always grow. And it's a practice. Every time you do it, your truth emerges in that moment, in that time. And it kind of reminds you who you really are, what you really are, tunes you into your intuition, your sense of adventure and mystery. And what I want for you above all is an experience of a love of life, falling in love with yourself, and a real sense of the mystery of the divine in beauty, in humanity, in art supplies, and in you. Love you. Thanks for joining me. Let me know if you have questions.